Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to the Thai Global Summit audience. One more session is waiting for us, and I thank the panelists here that will be addressing consumer data as an asset as the session for the next 40 minutes. And it's a privilege and an honor to introduce CEO of Viva Investment Partners, Julie Meyer. Julie Meyer has decades of experience as digital entrepreneur and investor. And welcome, Julie. It's all yours.
Thank you so much. I'm Julie Meyer, and I'm based in Zurich, where Viva Investment Partners is based. It's a super pleasure to have been invited here by Madhvir Sharma to chair this panel. I've got some very impressive entrepreneurs with me. I just wanted to give a perspective from myself, having sold a business to Google in March 2011 called Beat That Quote. Beat That Quote was in vertical search in financial services. And just as the time that Google was starting to go into vertical search, they had acquired a business for some 700 million in travel. We were able to get them to acquire Beat That Quote for 122 times EBITDA multiple, 122 times EBITDA multiple. And the reason for that was really that the entrepreneur, who is a very, very impressive individual, John Paleomolaitis, understood that data, the consumer data in the vertical search business, Beat That Quote, that he was building was a huge asset. And he understood that property rights would be aligned with the consumer data for individuals. So I've taken a keen interest. I've written a lot about this issue. So it was one that I was very interested to hear the perspectives of the panel, and hopefully we'll have some good questions coming in. If you do have a question, you need to just send it through because we will be able to ask the two panelists. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our two panelists. The first is Harsh Chand. He's the founder and managing director of Ignite Data Solutions. Harsh is with us here from Melbourne, Australia. I've just been told that Melbourne is well and truly out of a 6-month lockdown and people are back on their bicycles and so forth. That's not Melbourne behind your head there. So he's actually imagining, I think, going to places like San Francisco. Good for you. Harsh has been at the forefront of working with organizations and communities, leveraging data. He's going to tell us all more about that because he comes from a very interesting background in energy and so forth. Harsh, thank you for joining us.
Thanks,
and
Sheila.
Then we also have Bhavit Sheth, and who is the co-founder and COO of Dream 11 Dream Sports. And despite having more than 100 million users, Bhavit, I had not heard of you until about a month or so ago. So I'm very impressed with a business that has grown to become the number one sports technology company in India. India today, next stop the world. So well done. And you'll explain to us how you've managed to do that and the consumer side of data. So thank you for joining us, Bhavit.
Thanks, Julie.
So Harsh and Bhavit, as a way, perhaps even a more interesting way of introducing yourselves and your businesses, I want to throw the first tennis ball out there onto the tennis court and to ask you both to explain, was data and the management and manipulation and so forth of data, was that the core fundamental value proposition of your businesses when you set them up? Bhavit, why don't you take that one and again, introduce yourself. Was data the core element of your business when you set it up?
Sure. So just to start off, I'll tell you one of our core pillars of our culture is data obsessed. So we say 99% data, 1% gut, right? And that 1% gut also because sometimes, consumers don't know what they need. And a very, I would say a good example of that is if Steve Jobs had gone out there and asked people what they needed in their phones before the iPhone, they would have said they needed an unbreakable phone with, a long 2-day battery life, a nice big keypad. And Steve Jobs went and did completely opposite of that, right? He built the most fragile phone that could be there with fully glass in front. And obviously a battery life of 8 to 9 hours. But that aside, that's the 1% guard. But we've built our entire business based on data, data analysis, and looking at user cohorts, user behavior, seeing how we can improve the experience for the user through A/B tests, which is fully data driven. And anything we do needs to have a data driven hypothesis. And after we've launched that feature, launched a specific platform, we look at what the actuals are, compare it versus the hypothesis, and get learnings out of it. Because what's important, obviously, is not only data collection, but actually analyzing the data the right way, right? And sometimes a lot of people kind of lose their way somewhere in that mountain of data by not analyzing it the right way. And so that's something that we've focused on a lot. And we've built up a user base of 100 million users on Dream 11, which is our fantasy sports platform for more digital sports engagement of sports fans. But what we've also done now is, because we have that much data from these users, we have gone out and built different platforms in the sports vertical, whether it be merchandising, content, uh, uh, turf booking, academies, sports academies. And what we want to do is use the data that we get from all these platforms and build a unified profile for a user in such a way that, when a user comes on to any Dream Sports platform, he gets to see exactly what he wants. He gets a personalized experience, right? And that's where the magic happens, because you don't have to actually go in to an app and search for what you want to do within that platform. Rather, the platform shows it to you upfront on what you want to do. And that's the long-term vision that we've embarked on, which obviously involves data. And as you said, we're actually looking at not only being a sports technology, but sports data and technology company.
Okay. So is it fair to say then you have a pretty deep well of data on 100 million people? Yep.
That's correct. Yes, and we make sure that we instrument and we get our data properly. We analyze data in the right manner. So, as I said, it's easy to lose yourself in that mountain of data, but it's important to just structure it properly and analyze it.
That's it. That's an incredible asset to your firm, and that's super interesting. So thank you for that introduction. Harsh, let's go over to you. You're dealing with some of the largest companies, not only in Australia, but in Asia Pacific, as I understand, and in ecosystems such as energy, possibly with 100 million people as customers in their businesses and so forth. Introduce your business and whether or not data was really at the core of it. From your website, it certainly looks like it was.
Oh, look, yeah, Julie, we're all data, I suppose. We're at the heart of it. We're data analytics geeks, and we sort of put a bit of a commercial edge and an end user adoption end to it. And I've sort of resonated a lot with what sort of Bhavit said as well. I mean, we I suppose from a user base point of view, it's very different for us. Our user base is the businesses that we consult with. We're a niche data analytics business. Having said that, we've worked with global supply chain organizations to energy companies that are dealing with smart meter data, to agribusiness that have precision agriculture technologies and data points that they're collecting on how to make the grass greener, I suppose. So we've been blessed that we've got a lot of those insights. And before I forget, I actually wanted to just say thanks to Ty for this opportunity, and also very grateful for the listeners to joining in, and hopefully they get something out of this. But I think in a way, what Bhavit sort of shared was why it resonated was we sort of deal with a lot of organisations. We partner with them to try and simplify this concept of data in a way. It's we put it down as 4 C's. You've got to collect it and encourage the collection of it. You've got to connect the dots. You've got to curate the insights, and then you've got to make it very easy for those insights to be consumed. So, think of collect, connect, curate, and consume. So we sort of try and simplify that. I suppose what we found in our just my personal leadership at organizations is 80% of the time organizations are spending collecting and connecting dots. They're spending their time, their investment, and actually their frustration in that spot. And I think what Bhavit was talking to as well, the real companies that are getting an edge are those that are asking good questions of their data. It's the ones who are actually looking at it and going, what is the clever question I can ask? What is the clever insight that I can create? And then how can I present that in an easy manner to my consumers? And it's sort of like what Bobby was talking about, it's 100 million users create a lot of insights or a lot of data, but unless you can personalize it for them. I mean, ultimately, all businesses and all entrepreneurs are in the game of make it easier for your customers to find you and to engage with you, do business with you. Let's create some value for them. Whether it's entertainment, let's create some value for ourselves. Make the price. Can we get a better price? Can we get a low, higher marginal cost? But I think the number one thing with data at the moment is, can you actually truly engage your consumer? Because if you can get the engagement, obviously with fantasy IPL and stuff, people will be willing to share. But without engagement, it's very hard to collect data from people. Very, very difficult to get that. Utilities is a classic one, right? Only 5% of consumers really are that interested because they've got solar, they've got battery, they've got an electric vehicle, they've got a pool, they've got a high bill. The other 90%, they just want to switch the light on and pay the bill, or maybe not pay the bill. So, but there's a huge amount of data there. So the biggest challenge for utility companies globally is, how do you get up on the pecking order of engaging consumers? How do you actually start competing with like the fantasy IPL, where that's obviously very easy to engage with? So I think for us, that's the number one goal. If you can get people to have a two-way conversation, a sort of synchronous conversation through data, then it becomes a real asset.
Now, if you ask most people, I think on any continent, what the most successful data companies are, Facebook would be high on the list. Google would be high on the list. Let's refer to those companies for the moment as native digital platforms. Bhavit, you're a smaller one. You've got 100 million, but you don't have, a couple billion customers yet. And Harj, you're dealing with organizations that are seeking, in some cases, to compete with the likes of these digital native platforms. We're at the end of the year. We're looking into 2021. Do either of you predict that either something as dramatic as Facebook will get broken up because of the abuse of data, or that there could be a more traditional, a kind of incumbent player in any industry? Financial services tends to be sometimes some of the fastest moving, and that could actually grow as quickly as some of these digital native platforms because of the use of their data. Or is there just a complete separation between the companies, like Facebook, Google, Amazon, and so forth, because of their use of data for 10, 15 years? And there's really no chance for these other traditional incumbents, established businesses, even with the best of, all of your insights, Harj, and looking up models like yours, Bhavit, they're just not going to catch up. We're seeing a complete separation in terms of digital native platforms being valued at hundreds of billions. And then there's the rest of the universe, which is just not growing as quickly. Who would like to tackle that one?
Sure, I can go first. So there is a definite large divide between these digital natives and traditional businesses. But that is not to say that, if you structure your company the right way, if you have data the right way, you can definitely challenge some of these larger digital natives. but it's a short-term play. It requires a kind of mindset, which you have to have, like the digital natives have, and it'll be a mindset change for a lot of incumbents, right? And so, if you ask me, 2021, I would say difficult for these guys to reach at the level that the digital natives have reached, but at least they should start off in 2021 and aspire to reach at that level, right? And that's the kind of mindset change that needs to happen for them to actually reach where the digital native businesses are. And on the second part on breaking up, I think there's a lot of discussion that's been going on amongst especially in US on the big tech. But I don't see any harm in them collecting this kind of data. They're providing a platform to users. The users are willingly using the platform. As long as these companies are not snooping around, they're collecting data the right way. I don't see any harm in that.
Mm-hmm. We could all choose not to go on Facebook, right?
Or
Essentially.
and they do have privacy settings. What would you prefer, having personalized ads on Facebook or just random ads coming to you on Facebook, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, precisely, it's all a choice. The privacy settings many people don't use, but they are there. Arsh, how would you react to that question? How do you feel about that subject?
Oh, look, I think, is anybody going to do it in 2021? Who knows? Who knew that COVID was going to happen in 2020? But I think there'll be a natural sort of a bit of a squeeze from both sides. US has already started its discussions around breaking up. What that actually looks and feels like will be interesting, because even when you break up a company like Facebook, from a data point of view, you still end up with a hell of a lot of data, and a lot of control. I think from the other side, you've probably got the consumer relationship with the organizations that they are dealing with. There's been a lot of talk in Australia. Would Google with the Alexias and stuff, would it make a play for utilities? Are you really gonna, as a farmer, are you going to start suddenly dealing with Facebook as your key provider for? I'm not sure they have that much reach, purely because there's a domain trust there. Right. I think there will be a bit of a squeeze on both sides. I think what would be very interesting to see is transparency. I think transparency, you can try and break companies up as much as you want from a data point of view, right? And a stealth, and I'm not sure how it will land. But if you actually forced every single company, large or small, startup, scale up, massive conglomerate, to share in a transparent manner what they were doing with your data and how it was going to be used, to then empower you with the choice to go along with it, that's a different, I think that is a very powerful change. That's a completely different change. So I agree with Bhavit that there's a lot of us who are sort of freely giving our information, and I agree with that. But the privacy laws are a little bit, let's face it, they're ambiguous for a reason. Right now in Melbourne, we're going with logging into every single cafe we go. We have to sort of sign up, through the QR code and put in our phone number and our email address, and then it quite clearly, all these apps say, we will not use your data, but here are our privacy laws. Now then you go and check them, and the privacy law quite clearly say, we will use your data for aggregation and commercialization purposes. So it's like, well, hold on, which one is it? Are you going to use it, or are you not going to use it? And I think and again, I've got no problems with it, right? Because I'm like, look, if you can do something with my phone number, my email, even my digital footprint, physical footprint, actually, because you can tell where I am, I'm not really hiding anything, so go nuts. But if you're gonna aggregate it, and if you're gonna use it for creating, let's say, good recommendations for economical farming products, I'm in. If you want to give me advice on the best products for renewable energy, I'm in. If you want to use it to influence political outcomes, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Right. So I think that transparency, if that's changeable in 2021, I think that's a game an absolute game changer. Privacy laws don't really tell. Privacy laws say we might do something with it at an aggregated level, and that's about it. They don't say we are about to do this with it. Julie, are you in or are you out?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for moving the discussion in that direction, because I think that's the whole point of what we're here to talk about. And I'll just make a mention that I'm very aware of the fact that in India, Bhavit, you have a digital identity program that the government, I think it's been kind of hailed around the world as quite successful. So if you'd like to touch on that a bit later, please do. But what I think is also inevitable, and I guess the way that I want to ask this next question is, do you think it's inevitable or not that people are going to own their own data, that it is going to become an asset of the individual in the same way as property rights have been established for any kind of good that you could have? I can own a house, I can own a credit card, I can own a car. I can own the title to my visual, to my face. There's been companies that will enable you to exploit your visual if you're a celebrity or something like that. Do you think it's inevitable that as data becomes an asset, that it becomes an asset class, and that the ownership of that data will be then established as being owned by the individual? Maybe I could have your perspective, gentlemen, on that. Bhavit, do you want to give me your thoughts on that first?
Sure. I think that's the direction that we should be moving in, and we should have the data as an asset. But it's important to also understand that, and as you spoke about, this the entire national identity program, which is a digital identity program. There's been a lot of controversy around it, right? And because once you have that, who can use that data? And earlier private companies, fintech companies had access to that database to be able to do KYC on the users. And then this matter went to the Supreme Court, and there was a lot of controversy on who can use the data. And now it's very limited use of that data, right? So it's important, to understand how that data can be used, who can use that data, and there's a large, I would say, room for evolution of this entire way that data is used, especially the personal data. And now I also see just moving from personal to even countries are claiming that the data of their citizens should belong to them, right? And it should not be easily accessible to other countries. And India is in fact in the process of coming up with data privacy guidelines on similar lines of GDPR, to have that control of data given back to the individual. And it's very interesting to see how that is going to play out over the long term.
Harsh, what do you think about that? What's your approach there?
It's interesting, isn't it? It's like I suppose, and I've actually got a question for back to Bhavit in a way. It's like, at what level does the data truly become an asset? Like, it's because I sort of think about it, as I said before, like my phone number, my email address, and my digital footprint or something. Is that really that much of an asset to somebody? I think once you start aggregating it and disaggregating it and creating groups out of it, and maybe you can use it for personalization, but even personalization, you're trying to, and I think Julie, I sort of saw one of your talks earlier on around this network orientation of that's what it's about, right? It becomes a true asset when you can figure out patterns, like-minded people, like-minded networks. So I suppose the question really does become, like, is as I said, my personal ID that much of an asset? I'm not sure. My habits are a bit of an asset, but my habits in line with the community I live in, or the country I live in, or my demographics, they become extremely powerful. So then it becomes like, and you know, people talk about data is the new oil and stuff. So you could think about the oil thing, right? So does the little drop of oil that gets, you know, explored right at the start, is that actually the asset, or is it by the time somebody's dug it out, it's been transported, it's been, you know, then put into cars and it's being used? That goes through a whole value chain where there's a lot of owners of that so-called asset. Who's getting the rights to that? Is it as it's getting handed around, the rights change? Because you could argue that me putting something in, yeah, I've got property rights to it, but the business who's actually putting the effort in to collect it and curate insights from it, do they have the asset rights to it? And then let's talk, you know, even in the B2C to B world where they're selling it to another business, once that business has sort of acquired it through a purchase, do they have the rights to it? So I'm not sure. It's an interesting one. I think the granularity, pardon the pun, is a bit weird, because it's like at an individual element, is it that powerful? I don't know, Bob, at an individual element, I mean, I know personalization, but is it that powerful, or is it the grouping, the aggregation,
No, I completely agree. It's the grouping, the aggregation, which is powerful. But the grouping and aggregation can happen only once, you know, at the personal level, data can be collected. And that's why I say that, you know, getting to that unit, the base unit, is important. But as you rightly said, it only becomes really powerful when it's aggregated.
and even at the base unit, I think property rights don't really come up, or right, you know, ownership, etc., doesn't really come up when there's a fair exchange. And what I'm, you know, like, I mean, you know, I share my information with Google because I get the search benefits. I share it for maps because I get the maps benefit. You know, I'll probably share it with Dream 11 because I'll go on and have a look at you know, fancy cricket, because I'll get the entertainment benefit. I think when there's a fair exchange, nobody really talks about it, and it doesn't become an issue. Like with any asset, when it's a fair exchange, it doesn't really become an issue. It's when the exchange starts becoming a little bit unfair, or we feel like it's becoming unfair, then it becomes an issue. So like Bhavit sort of talked about advertising, like with lots of platforms, right? It's like, cool, I'm freely giving my information because I'm getting something in exchange, but then you're selling that information to advertisers. Okay, that's fair enough. Sustainable business model, I'll buy it. Then I'm getting bombarded with those adverts, and then you're asking me to pay to avoid those adverts, but you wouldn't have been able to sell those adverts in the first place if it wasn't for my data. And I think that's where it starts becoming a little bit like, well, I'm not sure this exchange is that much fair, you know, it's that fair anymore. But to your point, we do have the power to, I suppose, completely opt out if we you know, so were on those sort of those warrior paths. I don't know. I think that's where it becomes interesting, where it becomes a bit unfair.
Let's talk about optimization. Everything in life is about optimization, right? So we could optimize for happiness. We could optimize for wealth creation. We could optimize for sheer entertainment value. The simple fact of the matter is that algorithm, whether it's in the advertising algorithm or the data in the Google algorithm for maps or search or whatever, our data is represented in that algorithm. It's how it's optimized, essentially. So what are the consumer tools? If the people who are listening to this, and I understand that Ty is going to republish this and rebroadcast this, we will also do that with our Entrepreneur Country platform. So we'll get some of your insights out to our community of 300,000. If somebody's listening to this and saying, gosh, you know, what should I do? You know, what are the tools that I should either protect myself or help to optimize my own ability to manage my data? Do either of you have any ideas on how somebody could move from getting smart about this subject to enabling themselves as an individual to, you know, to either optimize or to shut down data usage that they would not want to be done? Or from a business perspective, we could have business owners that are looking at this right now. Are there some applications, Harsh, that you would recommend or that you use in your consultancy, or indeed, Bhavit, that you use with Dream 11, and you say, well, actually the state of the art data platform or the toolkit to get some of the names out there, the companies and the tools, the software and the enabling technologies that are really at the forefront here? What would you say?
Look, for I suppose from our point of view, I'm not going to go into the specific technology stacks and stuff, because they're almost like the enablers, the widgets. I think the real good one, for me, it keeps coming back to, are you asking good questions of the data that you're collating? Because if you're asking good questions, you'll figure out whether you're collating good data in the first place. And I suppose, again, Julie, I sort of mentioned one of your talks earlier on. What is it? Capital follows ideas. And whether you're an internal analytics team or a startup or something, what you're trying to do with data is generate ideas. And once you generate the ideas, you'll get more data, you'll get more ideas, you'll probably get more capital. So I suppose, for all the fellow entrepreneurs, startups, etc. out there, my view is that I think analytics people need to think more like entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs do think about ideas. And I think entrepreneurs need to think more like analytics people, a little bit like what Bhavit and his crew are doing, because you combine the two, it becomes very powerful. I actually think, and I think organizations, the sort of traditional organizations are sort of cottoning onto that as well. So for me, it's ask good questions, chase good ideas, and then the rest of it, the tools and all that will come out.
Yeah, I would say I completely echo what Harsh says. And, there's a saying, if you torture data enough, it'll confess to anything, right? And and that's not the point of collecting data. It is to get the right information out. And that's what, we try to inculcate in our people, right? That how do you ask the right questions? How do you make sure that, you're not going in the wrong direction just because you have these TBs of data and you found something from somewhere and you can say that, okay, I conclude this is what happens. But then are you looking at the whole picture? Are you doing any other kind of cross validation, right? And that's what we encourage people in the team to do. We encourage everyone to ask questions from people who are presenting the data, to ensure that the analysis is being done the right way. And that's when you really come up with the right recommendations.
And is it even useful, Bhavit? I mean, that's the other problem that we have with lots of geeks. They get caught up in the tools and the black boxes, but is it even useful? A lot of people talk about segment of one, but is that cost effective? Personalization is very different. Like, you're not going to have go-to-market strategies for every single 100 million users, but you do want to personalize their experience. And I think that's where there's a big education exercise for people that are coming out of universities, etc., with coding in their mind. It's actually, well, can I ask good questions, and then are those actually useful questions that somebody can do with it? I think another interesting one for entrepreneurs, because I do think this is something which is in our control to change, is can we change the dynamic of the relationship with the consumer? We've sort of touched on that sort of the property rights and stuff. I think there is something there, because entrepreneurs and startups are starting out. They're building their consumer base, but if entrepreneurs could give their consumers the right to opt in, the right to opt out, the right to delete, the right to partake, not partake. I think, going back to your question earlier on, I think that some of those larger digital footprint technologies they're a little bit too far gone to be able to do that. Their whole business models is against that to a certain extent. But I mean, wouldn't it be great if you had, like, let's say a fintech that came up, was using your data and was selling it as commercial insights, but they suddenly turned around and said, actually, Bhavit, I'm using your data to create commercial insights that I'm selling. I'm going to knock off the annual fee by 10% that I charge you if you want to opt in. And Bhavit could say, I'd rather just keep my privacy. I don't really care about the $10 or whatever the annual fee is. And I think that would be really exciting to see of these sort of new app developers, these startups that are are coming through. A much more empowering and transparent relationship.
Mm-hmm. That indeed was the proposition behind Beat That Quote. So Beat That Quote, as people were searching for, it could be mortgages, it could be anything, information, for the use of sharing more information, they were given discounts on the products and services. So it was that incentivization around the further disclosure of financial information, and recognizing that the quid pro quo was very much around the data. I recently became aware of a company which is called iDoot. Bhavit, I wanted to know whether or not it's a company based in India. It's iDoot, IDOOT.in. And they provide, they say, the world's first ID messenger, real-time authentication and sharing. And I think there's companies, there's a whole new category of companies which are in this, call it digital identity as a sector, which is emerging. And so I would share iDoot.in as one company, and I think there'll be many more. Now let's just imagine we have only a couple minutes left. Let's imagine that we reconvene TIE Global next year, and it's still the three of us. Couple of questions. Are we all meeting virtually next year? Are we framing the question of consumer data as an asset differently? How does this discussion move on? If you had to give a final kind of closing prediction to this, 12 months from now, the three of us, Bhavit, you're still running your business. What do you know in 12 months' time that you're sharing with TIE Global? And Harsh, the same thing to you. As a result of the projects and the clients and the insights, what do you share with this group in 12 months' time? Who would like to go first to that?
Sure, I can take it. So on the first question, I don't know. No one can predict when we're going to get back to seeing each other in person. But, just talking about, 1 year from now, from an India perspective, I expect, there being a lot more advancement on especially government initiatives, because they've already put out draft data privacy guidelines, and they've received a lot of feedback from the industry. So I see a lot happening on the national level on, the government dictating on data privacy. And not only for, the end consumers, but even for companies on, where data can be stored. So a lot of, in fact, in the last couple of years, the entire payments data has to be localized, cannot be outside India. So some of this has already started happening, and it would be interesting to see how that goes. Now, in fact, the government has gone one step further and is thinking of whether they should tax the usage of this data, because it's data of their residents, right? And that goes into another interesting territory completely. So,
well,
yes,
if it is an asset, then in certain countries, wealth or assets are taxed. And I think that brings in, one of the questions from the audience has been around this local global dynamic. So if there's a regulation, is it happening locally or globally? And I guess in the same way as you have what's known as natural justice in law, right? There's certain things that all of us would just naturally consider to be just or not just. Is there a kind of concept of natural justice in terms of the usage of data that India or the United States or Switzerland might take different approaches, but there is essentially a natural understanding of our data? But Harsh, let me throw the floor over to you to make sure that you have a chance here to give your opinion on the last couple of things. Mm-hmm.
Oh, look, you couldn't have asked that question. This is the hardest year to answer that question. Hey, Julia, around the next 12 months. I think it would be really intriguing. So
1 minute. I'm sorry, just 1 minute to close.
My prediction will all be in San Francisco for the next TIE. But look, I think the data privacy issue will become more apparent. Things like the vaccine, passports, all that sort of stuff that we're going to have to work through as a community over the next sort of 12 months. That's going to start bringing up a lot of questions in people's minds of, what am I sharing, what I'm not sharing. But I do think at the end of the day that all organisations, or a lot of organisations, are working for the greater good. So I think there'll be some good results to tell people that yeah, look, we are delivering positive outcomes globally, barring a few mishaps here and there.
Listen, I love the optimism because I'm an optimist as well, and we know that optimists rule the world. So I appreciate that. Both of you, Bhavik, good luck with Dream 11 and converting all of us, even the girls out there, to being sports fanatics on your platform. I love that. And Harsh, I look forward to, I'm going to be contacting you because I could see that you could be a fantastic partner for some of the portfolio companies that we have. So I'll be in contact with you too. We'll be doing our bit to take this panel session and the insights that you shared, take it out to the world on Entrepreneur Country. So if you are interested in becoming a citizen of Entrepreneur Country, go to entrepreneurcountryglobal.com or be back in touch. I have to bring it to a close here. It's been a delightful interruption and intervention in the midst of my day here in Zurich. And thank you both, Melbourne, and also India, and everybody who's joined us from around the world. Thank you to Tide Global and Mahavir Sharma for all of the work that it takes to put these things together and this discussion of consumer data as an asset class. Thank you so much. Closing out now. Thank you.
Thanks, Bhavik.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Julie.